Welcome everybody to the INWES webinar for the GISE project, the Perceptions in Gender Barriers in Science and Engineering project that we are delivering in collaboration with the Association of Korean Women Engineers and Scientists, KWSE. And thank you so much for the speakers and panelists who have joined us, and to the audience as well. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm Sarah Peers, I'm the project manager. We've also got Professor Kim, Jang-sun Kim from INWES, who's president of INWES, but also a senior member of KWSE, who will do the welcome, etc. Just to remind everybody who is joining us, please keep your microphone off when not speaking, and ideally your video off as well, because it makes life a little bit easier. We will have time for questions and answers, and we are recording this for YouTube. The program today, obviously, Professor Kim will start with a welcome. We have invited Katja Iverson, who's a very senior person, very well known in gender activism, to speak on international gender policy, and her messages I have heard and wholeheartedly agree with, and I hope we are aligned in some ways, maybe not in all ways, but in some ways we should be aligned. I will continue with talking a little bit about the project, what outputs we see already, and in particular the GISE Index, as we're calling it. I'll mention that to you all, because we think that's an exciting output from this project. We will then go on to a very important panel discussion, because this project, for this year, we wanted to reach out to Africa as much as possible. We thought it would be very interesting to have a panel discussion that does center around Africa. So we have activists from Africa joining us to talk about how they see the GISE project may be influencing their own work, and maybe what do we do next. That would be very good to hear. And then we'll finally, after an open discussion with audience, if we've got time, we will close with final words from Katja and from Jang-sun as well. We expect this to run until 1:15 at the very latest, i.e. an hour and 10 minutes from now. So Professor Jang-sun, I wonder if you would like to start.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So good evening. This is for Koreans and those in Asia. Good afternoon for those in the European continent, and I think in Africa as well. And I don't know if there's anyone from the Americas. It will be a good morning. So, oh yes, so good morning to you. I am Jang-sun Kim, who was just introduced by Sarah Peers. I am the current president of INWES, and I would like to welcome everyone to this very meaningful GISE webinar. The GISE project, where GISE stands for Gender in Science and Engineering, was conducted started to be conducted in 2021, and then again this year, 2022, jointly with KWSE and funded by the Korean government. The project was an expansion of the work that KWSE with APNN members conducted from 2014 for 5 years. The initial international collaborative study among the Asian Pacific Regional Network members of INWES provided comparative data on the gender barriers perceived among scientists and engineers in the region. And from last year, as we started the GISE, the project expanded internationally, and this year we're focusing more on the African region. INWES celebrated the 20th anniversary of our founding as a formal organization this year. We had a celebration actually in July this year. However, we go back to 1964 when the first triennial international conference of women engineers and scientists, otherwise known as ICWES, started. So after 8 years of the start of the gathering of women in STEM, of the gathering of women in STEM internationally, INWES has expanded the global network further, especially by establishing regional networks and starting various projects that would bring us closer to fulfilling the mission of INWES, which is building a better future worldwide by the full participation of women and girls in all aspects of science and engineering. We take our roles very seriously as an official NGO partner with consultative status of UNESCO and the UN ICASAC, and we hope to continue gathering the voices of women in STEM worldwide by continuing with projects like the GISE project. We're deeply honored today to have Ms. Katja Iversen, a global advocate on sustainability and gender equality, as our speaker today. Thank you very much. And we're also grateful to have our panelists, Dr. Evie Visa from Scotland, Ms. Cindy Gamasa, and Mr. Crispin Afifu, who are key activists in gender and STEM in the African continent. I'm very grateful that you gave us your time to participate and join us today at INWES. Before closing, I would like to I'll express my most sincere gratitude to Dr. Sarah Pierce, the project manager of INWES for this GISE project, and also to the members of KWSE, and especially the president, Dr. Sungjin Ju, and vice president, Dr. Suk-kyung Kim, and also our very own board members of INWES and the regional network chairs of INWES, without whom the project and today's webinar would not have been possible. I would also like to thank Ms. Hyunjung Jang and Ms. Eujang Min for their valuable assistance. And special thanks to Ms. Belen Garcia, and of course our treasurer and IT specialist, Sylvia Kigel, and the INWES IT team for your support as always. But most of all, my heartfelt gratitude to all our participants today. Science and engineering, together with gender equality, are vital agendas for the sustainable world, and we hope INWES will continue to gather the voices of women in STEM in the most rational and scientific way to achieve sustainable impact. Thank you. Please enjoy the webinar.
We would like to now introduce Katja Iversen. Katja is an author, a leader in civil society. She holds board positions with and executive advisory roles with organizations such as the World Economic Forum, Women Political Leaders, For Life Solutions, the King's College Institute for Women's Leadership, World Goals World Cup, and Global Health 50/50, and also with Unilever and the Global Sustainability Advisory Council there. Katja, I wonder if you would like to speak about your own experiences and you know, your messages for us. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted. And Sylvia, I was thinking maybe if you take this slide down, people can see me instead of my photo. I don't know if that's just a little more fun.
Okay, I'll stop the share.
Fabulous.
That was me. So
that's great. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Thanks a lot, Professor Jung Sung. Thanks a lot to the International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists. It is a really great pleasure to join you today for this webinar on the GISE and the very interesting GISE project. And I must say, kind of having women scientists and engineers engage in this, live it and do it agenda, I think we can really change the world. Yes, my name is Katja Iversen, and I am an advocate, an instigator, a troublemaker, an advisor, an author. And I work with everyone who want to really change the world for girls and women. It's not a coincidence I say girls first, because girls and women, because we start, of course, with the girl. And when I look at what you do, kind of getting girls interested in STEM is so vital. My main focus areas are really purpose-driven leadership, global health, gender equality, and how we get more women into both leadership, but also into power. I have failed and succeeded multiple times. Learning by failure is a good way, but learning by data is even better. So let me start by saying something loud and clear, just if there was any doubt about it. Getting a more gender equal workplace, getting more women into leadership, both in STEM and beyond, it is not about fixing women. Getting more equal workplace, getting a lot more women into leadership is not about women fitting in. It is about systemic change, culture change, attitude change, and men moving over. We need to dismantle the status quo and act on available data. And thanks a lot for the GISE survey, because that gives even more data for us advocates to do our work. It might sound like a lot, but let me also underscore that research shows that a diverse and gender equal workplace is not just dreamable, it is doable. And it is good for people, it's good for the planet, and it's good for the economy. Hashtag women in STEM, hashtag women lead. So you might have heard about the McKinsey report that focused on a gender equal workplace. You haven't probably heard it quoted, but it shows that if there was gender equality in the workplace throughout the globe, the world could add 26% to global GDP. And that is a lot more than just pocket change. We also know that when more women are in power and treated more equally, companies are more profitable, countries are more sustainable, and families are both healthier and wealthier. But if it is so good, why hasn't it happened yet? Well, you have identified some of the barriers in your sector. Kudos on that. And many of them are the same that women in many other sectors and in all their rich diversity, women of color, indigenous, women with disabilities, non-binary people, women from marginalized groups. It's the same barriers that they face, some more than others. In many STEM fields, you just face them a little more. And what are we looking at? We're looking at barriers like lack of respect, lack of appraisal, lack of support and mentoring, lack of investments, the motherhood tax, the economic and promotion-wise consequences of having children, unequal pay, access to the C-suite and board position. That's just some of the barriers. We can dive a lot more into it. I could speak a lot more about that. But the most important thing is, how do we overcome these various challenges? And yes, it is not about fixing the women, but about how we tackle the systems and the culture that, frankly, value men over all others. Time is short, and I know you will be discussing this at length in the panel when I shut up. So let me just kind of point to a couple of things. One, what is it that we need to do? We need to translate our data so people can not just understand them with their brains, but also feel it with their hearts. We need the economic and emotional investment case that show how much we every year loses by not having enough women in STEM and fewer women in STEM leadership. But we need to translate it in a way so that it gets to people. So that also means getting it out of a long report in a distilled manner that speaks to both the head, the heart, and the hands. We need, number two, we need to beat up the biases that people have, biases that's ingrained in the systems. And we need to shine the light on them, call them out, discuss them. We can learn from and lean on a lot of the broader diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's going on around biases in different manners, and I'd be happy to share more about that. We need to be seen a lot more. You can be what you can see, and we'll never change the pipeline if we don't see women scientists and engineers on the front page publicly a lot more. And that's you. And I know many of you are already up there, but it can be done a lot more in most workplaces. And we need supporters within and outside workplaces, not just mentors, but supporters who will vouch for us, kick some doors in for us, and stand with us and up for gender equality, because it's the right thing and it's the smart thing. Looking at who is in power, many of those supporters will have to be men. And thank you to the men in the room for being here, because let's also underscore that gender equality and lack of women's rights, it's not a woman's problem, it's a societal problem, and it has to be common solutions. And finally, where it does not already exist, we need all discriminatory laws off the books and get progressive ones in. So that was kind of the part about policy and system change. Whether this is about childcare, parental leave, equal pay, transitionary quotas, I know that's a hot topic, education, health, harassment in the workplace, labor and leadership laws. We need to look at the legal. And when I was advising the G7 presidents and prime ministers, that was a lot of what we put our effort on. So we have a whole idea catalog with ideal legal frameworks that could be implemented. But nothing comes of nothing. Some think that we are on an upwards trajectory and that progress will come automatically. It might have been that for a couple of decades, but I'm sorry to say it isn't anymore. All the progress made in gender equality and women's rights is because there were women and some men who fought for it. They fought hard for it, and some died for it. We're standing on their shoulders and continuing the fight. But I'm really sad to say that standing on those shoulders right now is not a pretty view. It was said that the gains in women's rights and gender equality, 25 years of gains, were eradicated by 25 weeks of COVID. And data really shows that the pandemic have taken its toll across the globe on women's status in society and participation in the workforce. The newly launched Reykjavik Women's Leadership Index also shows that there's actually a growing negative sentiment towards women's leadership, not least among young men. So this is something we need to work on. We also see pushback on women's health and rights across the globe in both rich and poor countries, a pushback and legal changes that hold women back and will do if we don't push back. So we need to stand strong and we need to stand together among us, but also with other groups. You know, women scientists and engineers are not the only ones fighting this fight. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization and learning that can happen. So it's time that we get back to some good old-fashioned solidarity. People need that, and the planet needs that. Your skills as scientists and engineers, and as women and men, are highly sought to right some of the planetary wrongs we're seeing right now. There's no planet B, and as leaders, we can both walk and chew gum. Climate change and gender equality is also very connected because we see some of the consequences hit women a lot harder. We can work for gender equality and work to curb climate change at the same time. And just because things are hard, it does not mean that we won't do it. Because as I said, getting a diverse and gender equal workplace is not just dreamable, it is doable and it is needed. It's good for people, it's good for the planet, and it's good for all of us. Hashtag women in STEM, hashtag women lead, and hashtag just do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was a very inspiring talk and so much in there and in fact so much around action and what actions we could be taking. So maybe that'll influence our panel discussion. Katja, thank you so much. I'll now go on to talk a little bit about the project as it is at the moment in terms of you know what's coming out of the project. I'll try and keep it short, however. So I'll try and keep to the highlights. There will be people, and I'm just wanting to double check that these slides can be seen. But there will be people who might, in the audience, who might not know too much about the GISE project. So I wanted to perhaps start with a very quick outline of the GISE project. So it is as Professor Kim mentioned at the very beginning, it is a continuation of studies that are started in 2014 by the KWSE members of who are members of INWES. And it is funded by the Republic of Korea, the Ministry of Science there. In 2021, KWSE wanted to make it a truly international survey. It had been international in terms of reaching out to many countries in Asia, but we wanted to go beyond. We also wanted to start identifying look at sectors individually and include all areas of STEM, because as Katja said, some of the issues that we have as scientists and engineers are common to many other areas and other intersectional groups. One particular issue for women in STEM is that often we talk about medicine and public and health services as being distinct from STEM when it really isn't. And we know that in areas of health and public health and medicine, there are many women in those areas, but they still have big issues around gender. So some of the past sort of assumptions made by women in science and engineering, which is the more women the better, doesn't necessarily hold. It's something else needs to happen. And I think, Katja, you've set the scene very well for that. We had some targets, as you can see down here. In particular, we wanted to make sure that we reached Africa in 2022, which is why there is a focus on Africa in today's event. Just for anybody who's not seen the project or seen the questionnaire, it's very much based on perceptions. Several sections with statements where people were asked to respond on the Likert scale from 1 to 5, where 1 was strongly agree with the statement. Some of the statements were about, if you agreed, it indicated gender equality. If you didn't agree, sometimes that also indicated gender equality. So there was a mix of statements. But also some of the sections C and D, were about experiences of actual gender barriers that people either experienced as women or saw other people experience. So men might have seen women experience. It is a very extensive survey. Relatively quick to complete. We do have a very extensive section A, which is around the confounding variables, including family circumstances and region-specific questions. And in fact, the approach is very much in agreement, aligned to commentary that has been made by the World Economic Forum and World Bank around perception data being very interesting indeed. We also, when it came to the STEM sectors, we made use of a UNESCO classification, but then had to amend it quite considerably and had to cluster it because obviously comparing all of these is quite difficult. So we clustered sort of the numerical sciences, we clustered the natural sciences. We started off clustering all the engineering and then discovered that that was a big group. We clustered the sort of health sciences and medicine, and then the animal and agricultural sciences and engineering as well, and then the social sciences. And finally, we made sure that we had the sort of the potential for others. So, and in particular, apologies, as I clicked out of the screen. In particular, I mentioned the sort of engineering was a very big cluster. So we actually sub-clustered it into, and also the architecture and town planning in many countries, architecture does not really align to engineering. And there are many other sort of niche sectors that don't sort of match to the sort of core engineering disciplines that many of us are familiar with. So there was another sort of bundling of environmental engineering, and other fields of STEM. We did manage to reach, we had a target of at least 15 countries. We reached over 79 countries, various degrees of success in terms of actual reach, but an actual take up, but it has given us a very nice, rich sample to go for. And if you've seen this, it was delivered as a Google form. We disseminated in all sorts of different ways and varying messages, etc., through social media. In particular, we had a plan for Africa, and our consultant in Africa, Paul Bernard Noah, was extremely good at making sure that he reached out to many groups in Africa and involved many people. We also had another consultant, Ivan Baptiste, who also reached to some areas of Africa, but also went out to Europe. So there were many events in Africa, and that was wonderful. So an overview of the actual results, because I realize I've only got 1 minute. We actually reached nearly 3,000 responses. However, in the initial analyses, we've only included just under 2,000 because there were some responses were received quite late. And of course, there are always responses that are in error or not quite complete, etc., where we're we feel that there's something slightly, there's obviously something wrong with what the process happened there. But we ended up with 50-50 in terms of women. We also had some non-binary, so we were keeping it open to the idea of non-binary genders as well, and that might be important in the future. And we had these 7 STEM clusters that we compared against. Also, those 79 countries, we considered 8 regions or countries that were statistically significant in terms of grouping, etc. Well, we think we've got data that might change the world. Well, maybe just the STEM world, maybe but that might be a start. But we think it, we're not 100% sure. Just a sort of sample of some of the things that have come out, we have, in 2021, we noticed that there was a big disagreement between men and women. That continues in 2022. And because we've got an even larger sample to look at, we noticed that the list of statistically significant disagreements is much longer. So for example, one of the most contentious statements were about the experiences of women in STEM. So women were much more likely to agree than men that women are being disadvantaged in receiving promotions, grade appraisals, research funds, or scholarships. I think Katja mentioned funding and finances, absolutely. Also being able to lead, being given the opportunity to lead research work. On the other hand, we also noticed that although the differences weren't so stark, there's also differences in terms of that agreement around quota systems and affirmative actions. I think one of the most saddest things from the whole survey for me was that the statement around, I believe things will turn out fine in the future for women in STEM, it was actually one of the key areas of disagreements between men and women in global. We could actually look at each country one by one. And so we have got some interesting, things to raise with each country. So for example, in South Korea, there is a sort of strong element around those experience statements, but also women were much more likely to talk about the affirmative actions and policy support. We noticed some unusual disagreements. But we do also notice where sample size for men was small as well. These are some of the other elements that we noticed around the world. So in Africa, the sort of men seem to think that marriage, pregnancy, and childcare had relatively little effect on scientists and engineers, while women said no, there was a big effect. By the way, when I say relatively, I don't mean that men didn't agree with this. It's just that the difference between the strong agreement from women, or rather the strong disagreement by women, was much stronger than the disagreement by men. In Europe, women complain about personally being affected by gender barriers. But there's also this slightly odd thing, because we think of Europe as being relatively gender equal in terms of thinking, but there was actually a strong disagreement between men and women in relative terms around whether or not women are more rational, less rational, etc. India, we had a wonderful turnout from India, and that was a very interesting area. And I think Katja mentioned young men and the pushback on gender equality. There were a lot of quotes and comments made. There was a chance for people to comment, and lots of comments from young men in India talking about how women are, that the bias is against men, not women. And these were the other areas as well that we could look at and have have a sort of picture of what's happening around some other countries in the world. We carried out lots of different data analysis, and I mentioned here in the bold, we do want to carry out more analysis, particularly around comparing Francophone and Anglophone Africa, because we feel that there is something there to change. There might be differences. We carried out an analysis on gender indexes and also comparing human development and gender, and I'm thoroughly running out of time, so I do want to speed up, but you'll notice that we had some interesting, the fact that the high human development index, that we could compare that against the responses of the other rankings. The GISE Index study, we proposed this. We proposed something last year, which was just about comparing men and women's responses. This year, we sort of realized that actually what was coming out much more strongly was the absolute views of men and women versus the comparison views. So we have created a GISE Index, which is based on 2 factors. And these are the initial results of the GISE Index. Now, there is a whole process. Now, the GISE Index being 0 for Africa doesn't mean that there is no potential for gender equality in STEM in Africa, but what it means is that out of this grouping, these comparisons that we have made, Africa lies at the bottom in terms of potential for change and gender equality in STEM, while South America lies at the top, which is slightly odd, and we will be looking at that in more comparison. But you can also see the effects of the 2 factors. So the absolute factor, which just says, what do we think about gender equality right now? So South Korea is saying, actually, our gender equality is not good. So you can see that factor 1 ranking being 4 is low in that 1 to 8 ranking. But the factor 2 comparative index, which is, but do we think, are men and women in agreement that there is a problem? Yes, they do seem to be in agreement that there is a problem. And so there is a high potential for change, which is about, making sure that men and women are working together to make a change for STEM. There are some inconsistencies, but I'm thinking that the interpretation really does include that for change to happen, we need to change the system, culture, behaviors, and not the women. Next steps, we will be publishing the final report and carrying out a little bit more comparative analysis. We also want to share open data, and we know that we're collaborating with further groups in the future. I'm really running out of time, and I really would like to hear from the panelists. Dr. Evie Visa, Cindy Gamassa, Crispin Afifu, thank you very much for joining us. I have set you the task of explaining in 2 minutes what you're doing. I've also said, well, have you used gender data, or do you find that there's a lack of data? And how do you think we might use the GISE outputs and the GISE Index for your own work? Please, may I hand over to the panelists? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is everything okay if I start first with Cindy and Crispin? I don't want us everybody just unmuting the same time. That happens in my classes. So thank you for the invitation. First of all, thank you for the introduction. And most importantly, thank you for all the work that everybody has put into that project. It was not easy, I know that, and it shows with the report and the amount of effort that went in. And of course, to the participants. Some of the questions, they were quite, awkward for some perhaps to respond, and they did it. So very well done to that. Now, a little bit of my introduction. You may be wondering why a person with my complexion talks about Africa. I don't meet the demographic. So I've been working with community groups, academics, professional engineering organizations that they're located in different parts of Africa for a number of years. And I hope I will continue to work because they're inspiring. The work they're doing, it's absolutely amazing. I am a mechanical and manufacturing engineer, my profession, and I work as an academic. So many of my students are from the global south. So I have this experience of talking to them about the challenges. It's like, why do you leave your country to find education or work somewhere else? And I like Katya's organization that's mentioned Women Deliver, because yes, we deliver, don't we? It's like every time we deliver, and it's not just babies, we deliver results. So my work is bringing engineering skills to the craft women, because I believe, especially for females, you do not necessarily need a degree to be an engineer. We engineer ourselves quite often out of poverty, how to do better life, how to survive in a very cruel environment, because it's still a man's work out there, although women are doing all the work. So to answer to Sarah's questions about the survey, my background, apart from manufacturing engineering, is on performance management as well. And I think we cannot change anything unless we measure it. And data is very important for that, because we know there are issues, but if we don't have the data to back it up, it's like we cannot do much. Especially nowadays, we're in a data-driven world. I can know how many steps I do every day, how many calories I take. So not having the data that will drive policy, we will not go far. We will create tick box policies that may not fit the settings. And the importance of the survey is like, it covers so many countries. It covers places that nobody was asked before. And that sets a fantastic baseline. That it's like, it's a starting point. It's like people get used to getting asked these things. And then the policymakers, the academics, the professionals, they have the information to back it up. The fact for me that it asks about perceptions, it's very, very important, because I've been involved in many gender-specific groups, the Women Engineering Society, women groups, mentoring groups, telling women, having women talking to other women, telling how good we can do, it doesn't take us far really, because I know how good and efficient women all over the world are. It's about telling them to the other people, or about sharing the perceptions with the men in work, with the men in policy making. Most of the politicians are still male dominated. So showing or revealing, the data for places that there were never anything like that before. I was looking at the report, and apart from the findings, I really liked the research papers at the back. So I hope if you haven't, you'll have a chance to read the report, some of our participants. It's this research, because many of the places, especially in Africa, research capacity, it's something that it's trying to encourage. We know the problems, but if we don't put them on paper, do something that it's validated and verified and share it with the world, we will be talking about the same things in 30, 50 years from now. And some of them are still, that's the case. So I talk too much, I have this habit, and I will give them, I'll pass the virtual microphone to my colleagues. But for me, it's a beautiful beginning of something even more beautiful to happen, science, the right way. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the rest of the team.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Crispin to have his say. Thank you. And yes, I speak far too much. Crispin, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evie, for that, and also for the linkage that, yes, you've been working with students from the Global South, and definitely you have that perspective. And so with respect to the question that has been asked, and of course, all of us and the presentation that has been made, and the findings out of the GISE survey, which I actually agree, I would want to say a few things. Number one, my name, as you can see on the screen, is Crispin Afif, working with the International Center for Research on Women based in Africa. At this office, I am the Gender and Women's Economic Empowerment Specialist. But even before then, before I joined ICRW, working with them as a consultant, and even when I came on board, my interest has been on non-traditional sectors where manufacturing has been key of those areas. And the subject of STEM has been one of the main areas of our interest. And particularly looking at how do we close the gender gaps in employment? How do we close the gender gaps in for example, issues of wage, and even the advancing the probability of us having more women being employed, for example, within the spaces where the STEM capacities are required. And so for that, I undertook one of the first and formative studies in Kenya on the women in manufacturing. And among the things we're looking at were issues, for example, of ownership of manufacturing firms and companies, the kind of skill sets that are required for women at different levels within different elements of manufacturing. In Kenya, at the moment, manufacturing is, I think, clustered in around 14 categories. And so we're looking at where is the concentration of women in those subsectors of manufacturing, and what does the policy framework look like? Now, out of that study, there has been, of course, requests that we've been responding to, that the similar studies are needed in Uganda and Zambia to help really to start tilting the scales and demonstrating that, yes, we need as many women as possible in the manufacturing sector, which at the moment we're talking about Industrial Revolution 4.0. And so asking, where are the women? Part of our stakeholders have been the Engineers Board of Kenya, which Dr. Mary Mwangi here might have an idea, that as of last year, for example, out of their 20,000 registered engineers, only 8% were women. And so then we are looking at how can we advance? Yes, there's so many, when you look at the transition from high schools to the university, then to the workplace, where are we losing these women engineers in this pipeline? And so once we are able to identify where we're losing them on the pipeline, then of course we can answer the question, how can we increase their participation, but also the employment, their decision-making at the job market level. Now, back to the question. Yes, data is key. And as Dr. Evie has already mentioned, we are in a data-driven world today. In the past 2 weeks, I've been engaged in speaking more about data as we measure how Kenya is advancing in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And in all those goals, for instance, you realize that it's data, data, data. And of course, this data ought to be used for decision making. This data has to be used for budgeting. This data has to be used for planning. This data has to be used in really identifying the key indicators of growth and development. Now, with regards to GISE data and any other data is available that we have had access to, I want to believe that this will be very useful, and I would challenge Mary here and ourselves back in Kenya, for example, where we are having manufacturing as one of the key pillars of growing our economy, just to be able to look at how can we use the data to address, for example, issues of gender gaps that might be available within the manufacturing sector, but also within the larger spectrum of industrialization. How can we be able to use that data to build inclusive economies? How can we use that data to sort of invest in gender diversity and respond to the gaps that already exist, be they gaps in training, be they gaps in various elements of perception, be they gaps in recruitment and promotion and retention, be they gaps in how we are presenting, for example, the products that are being made or manufactured by these women. And also they be, at the moment, I just want to give a quick example that I'm also involved in developing a gender policy for the TVETs, that's the Technical Vocational Educational Training in institutions in Kenya, and looking at what is making it impossible for more young women. And one of the speakers, I mentioned about girls and women, these girls to be able to really be attracted to join or to enroll in TVETs and stick in, study through it all, gain the necessary skills to make them job ready. Now, all those questions can only be answered by data. And so the GISE Index, which I'm looking at, and I'm worried that if Africa is still ranking at 0.00, which is really one of the lowest, how can we change that? Or what is required? And of course, even all of us really getting to understand that ranking deeply and get to look at the indicators that led to this level of ranking, and individually at the country levels, when we disagree this further, what's happening, for example, in Kenya and in other countries in Africa, so that then we localize the efforts to advance and at least score better by the next evaluation. Let me pause there. Sarah.
Thank you so much. Oh, hang on, I keep on switching off my video and keeping it back on again. Okay, thank you so much, Crispin. That's a really good point to continue on. And please, may I ask Cindy Gamasa to join the panel? Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm Cindy Gamasa from the Congo Brazzaville, not the Congo DRC, which is mostly known. In Central Africa, we don't get to often have a voice at the table. And so to be part of this discussion is very crucial and very important to me, and as well to our society, so that we can move forward and have this GISE index move from 0.00 to more, and maybe why not to the highest one, such as in South America. So I am Cindy Gamasa. I'm the youngest of the panel. I'm very happy about that too. I'm 27 and I'm an activist for women's rights, because it all starts with girls and women. I like to take this occasion also to remind us all that we are still in the 16 days of activism to end violences against gender. Not just women, but gender in general. But it starts with young girls and women around the world, which are the more targeted. Even in this area of violences, we don't have data in Africa in general, but Central Africa. Can you imagine what it is when it comes to sciences and the involvement of women in that domain of studies? The real problem is to look the way we look at education. My work in general is to shift the way we look at education in my country and my region in general, because we think, because of our traditions, that women should not be pursuing long studies because it drives them away from having families and building homes later on. That's the way we look at, you know, the living. But now we are in our evolving world, and being a young woman, which today I have a career, I have children, and I have a background in both science and diplomacy. So it means that we can do it all, and it will not stop us from, becoming women, and it will not stop us from being beautiful. And there is a real problem of glamorizing, sciences and the outcoming of this profession, and also a real problem of looking at the outcome, financial outcome of being in such a area of studies, which women don't look at and think that it should all just belong to the man, stay in the hands of man. Now we want to shift that conversation. So basically, I love this panel because we started looking at the GISE Index from a global perspective, and now we're coming back to that very local one, which I represent because I am the civil society, and I represent the voices of the voiceless, I would even say. And so we can see that on the global perspective, it's like if there is an effect and things are not moving forward, can you imagine where we still are at the local level, where we'll still struggle with the tiniest and the most important, which is just giving the right to education. So there are three barriers to moving forward, especially in my region, but in general, I would think, is the social cultural barrier, the economical one, and the institutional one, because we are still living in countries where our laws are sexist or have not moved forward or changed ever since they've been established back in the 70s, 16s, or even, the beginning of times. And social cultural, because like I said previously, we want to turn women to only look at the way they can handle a home, and not think and have this background and education that will help them be, a responsible human for their family and themselves. And the last one, economical, because we lack funds for investments in schools, in educational programs, even in our government, funds that are injected in programs for women, toward women, so that women can be more involved and interested in following and pursuing careers in science, tech, innovation, and communication, and all those things. So this is me raising and highlighting those issues, especially so in my branch of the government, which is I work for the telecommunication ministry. And so it's only been a year since we have this inclusion and a diversity branch in the government. And in all our missions, I always bring light on the role of women in the conversation, in everything we work on. And so also, I bring this very important role of parity when it comes to, raising panels and having women in the different aspects of the domain of sciences, and now giving them more voices, because like Katja said earlier, we need to see more women working in those areas so that we can have a role models and be inspired. So the GISE will it will be very, very relevant to all of us in Africa and in the world, because with data, now I will be able to go to young girls, to women, and tell them, you have role models, but here are numbers that you can also look at to see if you enter the STEM areas, this is what you can do, this is how we can help. And the reality we have locally also is that we have deadly disease, more deadly than COVID. COVID was just a crisis, it has passed. But we have realities such as malaria that we're dealing with on a daily basis, for which we need more women involved in the researches in the educational program. And we know that the African society in general depends on women mainly. So if we have women in the sciences, we will just be a very, very emerging society globally, but also locally. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And it's so embarrassing that the convener of the webinar can't keep to time, but everybody else can. So I'm just, so thank you, Cindy. There have been such excellent points being made, and you've really brought to life the reason why we are doing this. I'm happy, Crispin mentioned, the Industrial Revolution version for 4.0 in terms of technology. Maybe the Industrial Revolution 5.0 will be about involving everybody in industry, everybody in manufacturing. And Cindy, you made the point about, we need everybody involved to solve the potential future issues, particularly big problems such as, and you're quite right. I think we're all at the moment just relieved that COVID is over, but yes, COVID was just a crisis, and it's not the end of it. Evie, your complexion is my complexion, and we need to, people of our complexion need people of all complexions. We need to be all involved in this. So thank you so much for that. There was so much in there. I want to call on Rufina Dabo, Madame Rufina Dabo, who is the chair of the African Regional Network. Rufina has a comment, and I would like to give her the floor. Thank you. Rufina, are you able to speak? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Rufina. Do you want to...
Sorry?
Go ahead. I interrupted.
Yes, thank you very much to give me the floor. And I would like to tell you that this project is very important for us because in Africa, we have cultural attitude which cannot make girls confident to go to STEM, to study STEM. I am, as Sarah says, I am a chair of IREN, and we are doing our best to work in this field. And in AFSEC Senegal, I'm from Senegal, since more than 20 years, we are working with girls to make them more confident. And I think that parity and equity they cannot be achieved without the solidarity, or the governmental actions. And I think also that when we keep girls far from science, this attitude can be considered as a violence. It's my point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rufina. I think that's a really good summary of why why it was KWSE, incidentally, who were very keen to make sure that we reached out to Africa. So, and we have to thank the Korean government, and we have to thank the KWSE for having KWSE, yes, I've said it the right way, for having started this whole project. And I know it is about allies, it is about solidarity. This is solidarity across the world, and allies across all genders, and absolutely the government and institutional issues are needed. So, and I noticed Mary Mwangi has made a comment in the chat that we have identified lifelong mentorship as a critical intervention in bridging the gender gaps at all levels. That's very interesting. So maybe that's something I guess one of the next things to do in GISE is have a community of people who talk about how some of this data and how some of the outputs can actually influence and what actions do we take next. I wonder if anybody else has any comments or questions, or the panelists would like to add to anything that's been said. Please unmute yourselves, panelists. You can all unmute yourselves all together, the panelists, not the delegates, please, panelists.
I'll start again, if that's okay. I think my colleagues made fantastic points. Cindy, I'm very proud of you for your young age. I don't think I knew where to find my feet at 27. So the work that you are doing, I was thinking of saying something else, but we're recorded, so I will try and be polite. So very well done for that.
Thank you.
And for Crispin, fantastic work, because you've got the inside knowledge. Quite often we underestimate or we make assumptions about both perceptions of the other gender, but also the culture. Culture is important. Different countries, different cultures. I have found out, and do not judge me for that the time punctuality in different countries has a totally different element. So how social, political, legislation elements affect the way we work, we live, and what we tolerate, it does make a difference. But for me, this is the whole survey, and even the conversation today, it's like optimistic. It gives me hope. I know we're in 2022, going to 23, and we're suffering pandemic, mental health, and a lot of other issues, but it gives me hope. Every woman and every group that I work with Africa, and I'm doing a lot of work with Nigerian female engineers, and they're amazing. It gives me hope that things are changing. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast, but things are changing. And the things that Cindy mentioned, and all the people in the panel and the participants, it's like we're going the right direction. Maybe with the speed of a disabled snail, but we were going to get there because we do not give up.
Most definitely. Thank you very much. We're not giving up, and yes, it's giving hope to see that today it's all about intergenerational work. So the fact that you invite a young girl, young women to this talk, but also that we actually think together, men and women. Thank you so much, Crispin, to be part of this conversation. Is to highlight that yes, it's a work that we're doing all together. What we need to do more, because the main question in the comment section is to know what else can be done with high influences to interest girls in the fields of sciences and everything. Mostly is to really raise voices, to talk more about the professions, to talk more about the outcomes, like I said, to talk more about the financial aspects as well, because to be in sciences means that, you can actually have a living. It's mathematical. It's like you go to the medicine school. If you stay as many years, you will end up being a doctor. And in the end, you can have a salary, and you can have a career, you can build on many things. And so to have it actually helps build vision. What people lack in a world where they don't have the minimum, they don't have the education, they don't have food, they don't have money to live on for the next day, is vision. So if you give hope to people, if you give them a way to think and to actually envision their lives, it will be a plus, for them to know that, okay, there is a way. And through sciences, to innovation, to technology, we can actually create a better place, a better world where we are. I know right now what's really I would say trendy is to imagine a world in the metaverse and 3D world, which I do a lot actually, is to imagine smart cities. And when you can view a smart cities, you can see how people can interact in smart cities, their roles and everything. It's just, it really lights up, women's and men's faces. But really what's important, and I will end up with this we do talk a lot, sorry, is that we need more men, male on board. Like I said, this campaign activism that is going on right now for the end of violence against the gender is the same when we talk about having more women in the place of the sciences. We need men to be more interested in giving us a seat, in giving us a place, in giving us a way of seeing ourselves also in this world, being involved in this world, and not only wanting them to be there and us to be in the kitchen or something like that. This is an outdated way of thinking. Like everything needs to involve mentalities and also our policies, our laws, our schools, our opportunities, and everything that can be given to us. Also, we not only need to take it, but also it needs to be not men need to be conscious about this, that they need to let women also be themselves and try to help in that scientific world and development. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I think on that basis, Crispin, we're not going to allow you to speak anymore, but you're only a man, so yes, yeah. But no, Crispin, thank you so much. And I am only joking, but we do have an issue of time. And I do know, I did want to at least thank everybody who's been involved. I've put up the acknowledgements for 2022, and I'm sure I've left out lots of people, in particular, Paul Bernard Noah, who I think is online, and maybe at the very end, we can take a photo, and Bernard, you can show yourself because you were so helpful. Francis Jarry as well, as the statistician who did so much work around the gender index and talked me through all the things that we still have to do as well as have done. And the country representative, Seema Singh, I know you've just joined us. Thank you so much because you did so much in India, but everybody was so very helpful. Thank you. We also had some excellent supporters in Africa. And I do want to very quickly say before Katya and Jang-sun close, and that is one of the nice outputs is a GISE community that seems to be very strong in Africa. We're going to set up a group email. We're going to continue the conversations through Africa around what can we do with GISE. And Crispin, I hope you'll be able, we'll hear you then. We'll hear you then. Thank you so much. Cindy, thank you so much. Evie, thank you very much indeed. Katya, I wonder if you would like to say a few closing words, if you can, because I know you're not.
I can. I can.
Great.
So thanks a lot. What a great discussion. I learned a lot. This is one of the things I love, by kind of getting into different groups, different environments, different trades, because we all work for the same thing, or a lot of us do. So instead of everybody reinventing the wheel or inventing their own wheel, we can work together and draw on each other's experience. A couple of comments just on what I heard. One, I come from Denmark, and if you ever treat Denmark like you would treat Sweden, we would be furious. So there's no size fits all. Africa is a big continent. It's a lot of different peoples. It's a lot of different countries. So let's not do the aggregate, but also do the specific. So that's one. The other thing was about mentoring. We say in other places that the time of mentoring is over. We need support. This is not about people sitting giving nice advice, and that can be men or women, but it's actually people standing up for others. So this is not a mentoring in the terms that young women or professional women get in and get advice about what they should do, but it's actually somebody standing with them and standing up for them and kicking in some doors. So I think that when you move on to kind of having some mentoring systems, that's something you should take into consideration. And what does it mean to be a mentor? It's not a chat, it's a real standing up. And then getting back to what do we need to do? I have kind of 3 levels for that. There's a legal work, the systemic. We need to look at legal. And again, you don't need to reinvent it. A lot of it has already been done. UN Women has done some excellent analysis about what's needed in the different countries in terms of legal framework. We have the money, always follow the money. So kind of the investment in this. We know, for example, that the money going to entrepreneurs and also within science, it's dismal. But we also need money to do this. Nothing comes from nothing. And then we have the norms work, which is an extremely important thing. We don't change hearts and minds with data alone. Data does it, but what we see is also that you can present all the data in the world. We have done so many studies showing that it's good for the company, it's good for the economy, it's good for the country, it's good for the family, it's good for everybody. But if somebody who are in power feels threatened and don't want to give up the power, no data is going to meet that. So we also need to really speak to the heart and the mind in that sense. So the norms work, working with young men, working with men, working with different groups is to change the norms is extremely important. But it's great to see the work going on. It's great to see new data being produced. Let's present it in a way so that it really can get into action, because data that doesn't get into action might as well not exist, and take it on where it needs to be so it can change those hearts and minds and activate the hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katja. I have taken on board the heart and head message, because I do think you're right, and it's one of those things that always remains. You get so focused on data and you get so focused on technical reports, and you forget that that you still need to do that final most important part, which is actually how do you transmit the messages and how do you make sure that they are influential. So thank you. Professor Kim, I wonder if you'd like to complete the session. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. This is actually a very exciting webinar because first of all, we are able to present the very hard work that Sarah Pierce and our other colleagues have put together in a more presentable form that is more, I think, convincing this year. And again, and the even more exciting part is that we are getting these feedbacks. And also we can now think about how we are going to put them into actual action and to put them into, to use. I would like to thank Katja Everson for her very inspiring remarks, which I think which has been very encouraging for us, because this project has actually started a very long time ago. We have to really go back to 2011. The issue of bringing out an index for to measure the perception of gender barriers among women scientists and engineers was first raised in 2011 at ICWES 15 during the APNN inaugural meeting. Women who attended that meeting said that we need an index which can measure, especially at that time was more focused on the Asian Pacific. It took more than 10 years to come to where we are. But I think the important thing is that we did not give up, and we were very persistent, and this is actually what women scientists and engineers have been doing together as a network. So this really shows the power of what an international network of women engineers and scientists can do. But this is not the end. This is in a way another beginning where we have to move forward. And I think there's still a lot of things that we need to do, but we are now more focused, and we especially now have the support of our many friends from Africa, and I think this is very, very encouraging as well. So I would like to end my talk by saying thank you so very much to everybody, especially to Dr. Sarah Pierce. It's been an enormous amount of work that she has done, and a lot of hours and a lot of effort that has been put into this work. And I know it is going to be worthwhile. So let's keep doing this. And as if Evie said that we need, if we want to make any changes, we have to be able to measure them. And now we have a tool that we can do that. So I think we can move forward for more actions to come. So thank you so much. And I look forward to more communications with all of you. So let's keep our channels open and let's have more discussions as we go on. Thank you.